I woke up in a room I had never seen before, wearing yesterday's clothes, with a pounding headache and one terrifying thought racing through my mind. I had absolutely no idea how I had gotten there. The last thing I remembered was standing alone at the company party, holding a glass of sparkling water while everyone around me celebrated another successful year. Now I was lying beneath an expensive white blanket in a bedroom larger than my entire apartment. Then the door opened. My CEO, Victoria Bennett, walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She looked at me, smiled as calmly as if this were the most normal morning in the world, and said, "Good morning, honey." My heart nearly stopped. Before we continue, if you believe that people deserve second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Studio. Sometimes a single act of kindness can change a person's entire life, and this story is about exactly that. My name is Ethan Parker, and until that morning, my life had been painfully ordinary. I was 29, worked as a junior financial analyst at Bennett & Cole, and lived in a tiny apartment above a bakery on the edge of the city. I wasn't poor enough for anyone to notice, but I wasn't successful enough for anyone to remember. My father had passed away when I was 17, leaving my mother and me with debts that took years to escape. I had learned early that life didn't reward people simply because they worked hard. Sometimes you could give everything you had and still wake up wondering how you were going to pay next month's rent. Victoria Bennett was the opposite of me. She was 35, brilliant, composed, and the youngest CEO in the company's history. People whispered about her whenever she walked through the office. Some admired her, some feared her, and others assumed her success had come easily because of her family's wealth. But I had noticed something different. Behind the perfect suits and confident expression was a woman who often stayed alone in her office long after everyone else had gone home. The company party had been held at an elegant hotel downtown. I almost didn't attend because I couldn't afford to buy a new suit, but my coworker Daniel insisted that I come. Everyone was laughing, drinking, taking photographs, and talking about promotions. I felt like an outsider until Victoria unexpectedly approached me. She thanked me for catching a serious accounting error weeks earlier, one that could have cost the company millions. I told her I had simply done my job. She smiled and said that people who believed in doing the right thing even when nobody was watching were rare. Later that evening, something happened that changed everything. I noticed Victoria standing near a balcony, looking unusually pale. She had received a phone call and walked away from the crowd. When I passed by a few minutes later, I saw her sitting alone with tears in her eyes. I didn't ask personal questions. I simply placed a glass of water beside her and told her that she didn't have to pretend to be strong every second of the day. She looked at me as though nobody had ever said that to her before. I remembered nothing after that. Now, sitting in her bedroom the next morning, I desperately tried to reconstruct the night. Victoria noticed my panic and immediately told me not to worry. She explained that after the party, I had found her outside the hotel after she received devastating news about her mother's health. She had been too upset to drive, and when she suddenly became dizzy, I had stayed with her. I had apparently called a rideshare, but before it arrived, I had fainted from exhaustion because I had barely eaten all day. Victoria had taken me to her house because the driver refused to transport someone who was unconscious. I stared at her in disbelief. She assured me that nothing inappropriate had happened. She had slept in another room, and her housekeeper had checked on me during the night. My embarrassment slowly faded, replaced by confusion about why she seemed so concerned about me. Then she told me something I never expected. She had discovered that I had been working overtime at the office because I was secretly sending part of every paycheck to help my mother with her medical bills. She had learned it from payroll records after approving an emergency assistance request I had never submitted. She said she had also noticed that I regularly skipped lunch and walked home instead of taking the train to save money. I felt humiliated. I didn't want my CEO to know how difficult my life had become. But Victoria didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with respect. She offered me a promotion that morning. Not charity. Not a favor. A real position managing a small financial strategy team because she believed I had the judgment and integrity the company needed. I refused at first because I thought people would assume I had received it because of what happened between us. Victoria simply told me that if I couldn't accept success without believing I was undeserving of it, then I had already allowed hardship to defeat me. Those words stayed with me. Over the following months, my life changed. I became more confident at work, my salary improved, and I was finally able to help my mother without calculating every dollar. But something else changed too. Victoria and I became friends. We talked after long workdays, shared quiet dinners, and slowly discovered that beneath our completely different lives, we carried the same loneliness. Victoria had spent years believing that everyone who approached her wanted something. Money. Power. Influence. A connection. I had spent years believing that nobody would ever choose someone like me. Somehow, without either of us planning it, we began healing those wounds together. But office gossip eventually noticed. Rumors spread that the CEO was secretly involved with an employee. Some people accused me of manipulating her. Others claimed Victoria had promoted me because she was in love with me. I considered resigning to protect her reputation, but she refused to let me run away. Then came the moment that nearly destroyed everything. Victoria's mother passed away. The woman who always appeared unbreakable collapsed emotionally. For the first time, I saw her without the armor she wore every day. She sat alone in her mother's garden, holding an old photograph and crying like a frightened child. I didn't try to fix anything. I simply sat beside her. She eventually told me that her mother had always warned her not to confuse being needed with being loved. Victoria said she had spent her entire life trying to prove that she could survive without anyone. I told her that surviving alone wasn't the same as living. She looked at me through her tears and reached for my hand. Months later, Victoria and I finally told the board about our relationship. To avoid any conflict of interest, I transferred to another division under a different executive. It wasn't easy, but we refused to let fear decide our future. 1 year after that strange morning, I woke up in a completely different home. Sunlight poured through the curtains. Victoria was beside me, laughing as she struggled to make breakfast without burning the toast. On the kitchen counter was a photograph of my mother, Victoria's mother, and the two of us together from a family gathering. I suddenly remembered that first morning when I had opened my eyes in her house, terrified and confused, only to hear her say, "Good morning, honey." Back then, I thought those words meant trouble. I never imagined they would become the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of my life. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it, and subscribe to Kindness Studio. Your support helps us continue creating stories about love, kindness, courage, and the second chances that life sometimes gives us when we least expect them. And before the story ends, I have one special request. Comment, "Everyone deserves a second chance, red heart," if you believe that kindness can change someone's life. Because sometimes, the person who walks into your life unexpectedly isn't there to change your world for a moment. Sometimes, they are there to remind you that you were never meant to face the world alone.